All right, hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar on the 2017 Rugby Canada's 2017 Law Implementation Guide. Two housekeeping things. The first is that this session is being recorded. Everyone is on mute, so I will be the only person that you will be able to hear. And the videos that will be shown will be on mute as well. The other piece is that there is a questions tab where you guys can feel free to ask questions as we go. I will, after every section, maybe take a couple of questions and then move on. There is quite a bit of content, so as we go towards the end, we'll see how much time we have to answer any further questions, and then obviously my email will be available at the end for anyone else who wants to fire things away over the next few days. So without further ado, let's get started. So I just want to touch on what the purpose of the webinar is. The first bit is to understand the basics of the two key areas of focus, which are the content of this document. First is obviously around the 2017 global law trials that World Rugby has implemented as of January 1st in Canada. And the second is measures to limit contact to the head. The original presentation that I did with this had them reversed, and the reason why I put the measures to limit contact to the head second is because we can probably get through the global law trials fairly quickly, and I know the most questions will come in section B, so hopefully we'll have time for quite a few of those. The other things I want to try and get throughout this webinar is for everyone to understand the differences between community rugby here in Canada and the professional rugby we see in the video examples, and we'll touch on some of that a little bit later on. I also want to examine how we implement the directives concerning dangerous tackles at the community level, and finally identify how we can all work together to ensure that the welfare of our players is our primary concern. What you'll notice is that the last 3 points are really in relation to section B or part B of this webinar in regards to measures to limit contact to the head. Obviously, this is an area of concern and something that we want to make sure everyone's on the same page with and working together on it. It's not just a matter of referees implementing something, it's a matter of the community buying into it, but we will discuss that further. So we'll kick off with the 2017 global law trials. Key points in law, and I'll just list them here. All uncontested scrums must have 8 players. Teams have the option to kick to touch on a penalty awarded after time expires. Teams can choose the most advantageous penalty if there are more than one infringement during a phase of play. There's no kick on a penalty try. And I do have some video examples of a couple of these that are also available on the document, on the template to download afterwards. All right, in regards to the touch law, Law 19, touch and line out, the touch law has been revised to have the plane of touch as the primary marker for when the ball has left the field of play. In all cases where a player is attempting to reach over the plane of touch to keep the ball in the field of play, that player must first start in the field of play. And what we'll do is see all of these examples in the videos that are going to come. Please note that none of these key points that I've mentioned here is what is actually written in law. Those are outlined in the video. So our first example here is of that kick to touch after time has expired and a penalty has been awarded. So we'll just watch this play through. I apologize for the lag in the video. This PowerPoint is quite large with all of the video content in it. But basically, after the clock hits 80 minutes, we'll see the referee blow a penalty. And under the old law, this kick to touch would have meant that the game was over. And under the trial law, we are going to allow the attacking team to play the line out. If there was another penalty after this, then the same process would apply, as you cannot end a game on a penalty. Keep in mind, this gets important not so much in this game, although there is the advantage of getting within 4 points in a loss. But if it is a 3-point game or a 5-point game even, or a 6-point game, this could provide an opportunity for the attacking team to still score a try and possibly win on a conversion. So it's important that we get this right. I won't play it through as we end up getting the attacking team scoring here. If there's any further questions, let me know in a bit. Advantage, this one is pretty simple. Again, because of the lag, I'm going to walk through it. You guys can download the video once I send the link out. However, on the quick tap, we'll see the referee call advantage for not 10. Actually won't see it, but you will hear it on the video. And then he will subsequently play advantage and call a penalty for a player for white going off their feet at the tackle at this phase right here. And you will then see the referee point to the 2 infringements. I apologize, the video has lagged quite a bit. Trust me when I say that's what happens. And then hopefully when you download the videos afterwards, you guys can take a look and let me know how that looks. Okay, touch and line out. This is where we'll have a few changes. So again, obviously a lot of writing here. But we'll see that the player who is playing this ball under the old laws, because they were across the plane themselves and played the ball was already out. Now, what we're going to say is that because they started in the field of play and played the ball back before landing in touch, we will allow play to continue. Okay. Remembering that the plane of touch is now determining whether or not the ball has gone into touch or not and who has taken the ball out. These next two are good examples of when players tried in old law to use that as an advantage in terms of having the opposition deemed to have taken the ball out. Now, the only question is whether or not the ball crossed the plane prior to. So on this replay, hopefully it doesn't lag too much and we can get to it. We'll see that the player did indeed, well, we didn't see it, but the player did indeed catch the ball in touch as the ball had already crossed the plane, despite the fact they still had 1 foot in the field of play, okay? Because they had 1 foot out. The ball was out when they caught it, as well as the ball having crossed the plane. Therefore, the kicking team brought the ball out. The decision would be a scrum or re-kick or line-out option for the receiving team. Okay, and here, this is where things have changed. The receiver having caught the ball inside the field of, the receiver, having caught the ball prior to the ball having crossed the plane of touch, is deemed to have taken the ball into touch because they were in touch when they caught the ball, which means that the option now would only be a line out for white where the player caught the ball. And we'll see that in this writing here. All right, well, I'm glad that video didn't lag too much. So just a couple of points to keep in mind in regards to these parts of the trial laws. It is important for all of us to be aware that most matches do not have assistant referees assigned, which would greatly help in determining has the ball crossed the plane of touch or not in a lot of cases. So referees can help themselves in their pregame preparations by talking to team touch judges who have been assigned by each team prior to kickoff about what they should be looking for, right? And hopefully it's pretty simple in terms of just keeping an eye on whether or not the ball has crossed the plane or not, okay? And a good comparison is to look at the touch law for rugby now, exactly the same as in the game of basketball, where the plane of the line used for when a player is out of bounds or the ball is out of bounds at basketball. It's the exact same principle now in rugby. The only way a basketball player can keep the ball in the court is by starting in the court. It's the exact same thing for rugby now. All right? So those are a couple things to keep in mind. in regards to the law trials. Now, because of the description in the law trials, there was a request for clarification of the touch law in specific, which came out at the end of last year. And the key points to remember here are that the touch law trials apply to the dead ball line and the touch and goal line as described in the clarification. What's not in the clarification, but has been confirmed by World Rugby, is that the application of the trial law is also in effect on the 22-meter line. And we will get to the significance of that one in a second. So there's the link. So again, I'll run through these videos very quickly, and then we can take a look at what it means. So here's an example of the ball getting kicked towards the goal line and being played. The good thing is there's no replay, so we pause here. And the player, having played the ball prior to the ball crossing the plane of the goal line, is deemed to have brought the ball into the in goal. So instead of the 22-meter option, the 22-meter dropout for yellow, it would instead be a 5-meter attacking scrum for the team that kicked the ball. Okay. Dead ball line. So this is just a reminder. This does not change, provided that the ball has gone out across the plane of the dead ball line. The defending team or the receiving team has the option of a 22-meter dropout or a scrum from where the ball was kicked. And we'll see that they move up towards where that scrum was. Okay, and here we have an example of where the ball is kicked towards the dead ball line as well. And I'm worried about the lag on this one at the replay. So suffice it to say that because the ball was played by the receiving player in red prior to the ball crossing the plane of the dead ball line, the option for a scrum is no longer available. It is simply a 22-meter dropout for red because blue still kicked the ball across the goal line into the in goal. Okay, let's see if we actually do get to the freeze frame on the replay here. And we do, it's great. So again, that description is there. You guys can obviously feel free to, once download, share this content with your players. Okay, and here's an example of where, provided your players have some really good hand-eye coordination and acrobatic skills, are able to take the new interpretations and try and score a try. And again, we'll see on the replay here where in the old law, because the player played the ball when he was across the plane of touch, the ball originally in the old law would have been deemed to have been over the dead ball line. We now actually have a try because the player played the ball while still in the playing area, in the in goal, and playing the ball backwards prior to landing over the dead ball line. Okay. Now, where this can become significant in the 22-meter, and unfortunately I do not have video of this yet, however I am working with World Rugby to try and obtain it, is in a situation where a player is calling a mark. They must have started inside the 22, and the ball must have crossed the plane of the 22-meter line in order for a mark to be able to be called. So that's really the only place where it becomes contentious, in regards to playing the ball into the 22 and allowing the ball to be kicked straight into touch is also, well, sorry, that would also be an area where we would need to be vigilant as referees, as a player who catches the ball with 1 foot in the 22 prior to the ball crossing the plane of the 22-meter line will have brought the ball in. So it can be kicked directly to touch, except the lineout would come back from whence they kicked it. And the only way to avoid that and have the ball be thrown in from where it went into touch is if there was another phase of play. Right, so just something to be aware of. All right, a couple other points to keep in mind is that the decisions at the goal line can be the difference between an attacking 5-meter scrum and a defensive 22-meter dropout. It is the most significant difference within the clarification of that touch law that referees will have to be aware of. So it's especially important for referees when they don't have assistance to put themselves in good position to see the ball in context with the plane of the goal line. I think for coaches as well, it's important to also understand the realities when we don't have assistant referees. So on deep kicks by attacking teams with a defender who's already near the goal line, right, the play can happen extremely quickly. And I think it's important for the defending or receiving team to make it clear for the referee and wait for the ball to cross the goal line before playing it. If you try with the 1 foot over and wait, it puts yourself in a position where, listen, if the referee, when the kick was taken 50 meters away, has only made it 20 meters by the time you play the ball, it's still going to be a difficult decision. So just be aware and help yourself by making it clear and selling it quite easily by avoiding those positions on the field and making sure that the ball has clearly gone over the goal line before playing it. Just some tips for coaches and players. Okay. I'm going to give it a second to see if anyone has a question in regards to the touch laws, and I see there is one. So the question is, even if you have both of the feet inside the 22 but play the ball or catch the ball before it crosses the plane of the 22, is there a mark or is it possible to call a mark? The answer, Jeremy, is no, right? The ball must first have crossed the plane of the 22-meter line. Again, in real time, might be quite difficult for referees with no assistance to make that decision, but just keep that in mind. All right, now we're going to touch on World Rugby's measures to limit contact to the head. Paul Hunter made a good point on the phone the other day where it's looking to eliminate contact to the head, and those are indeed the purpose. It's part of the purpose of these measures. However, I just used the title provided by World Rugby. So let's take a look at what World Rugby had to say about them, and then we'll get into some of the content. So just want to make everyone aware of the release that World Rugby had and what their purpose behind implementing these measures were. So they're looking to introduce minimum on-field sanctions for reckless and accidental contact with the head. And what they're trying to do is lowering the acceptable height of the tackle, right? So again, it's something that isn't geared towards increasing the number of sanctions that are going on, but by being more severe, the hope and the anticipation is that players will adapt and begin to lower that initial point of contact to a point where we're not having as much or if any contact to the head at all in the tackle. And we'll get into a couple situations where that might be difficult to avoid, but certainly points of discussion. All right, and this document does have the link to that article. And then obviously there's video examples, but we'll get through a little bit of them here. I think it's important that we touch on the definition. So I'll give us a second to read this, but when making contact with another player during a tackle or attempted tackle, or during other phases of the game, if a player makes accidental contact with an opponent's head, either directly or where the tackle starts below the line of the shoulders, the player may be sanctioned. This includes situations where the ball carrier slips into the tackle. And there's a minimum sanction of a penalty. I understand there's confusion here, and I've mentioned it to World Rugby about the line where it says the player may be sanctioned, and then having a minimum sanction of a penalty. The interpretation is that when they say may be sanctioned, they're referring to increases of the sanction from a penalty to a yellow or a red card. So even if it was accidental, what they're trying to say is there is potential that it lead to a yellow or red card. However, the minimum sanction would be a penalty. So I hope that clarifies things, but just to make everyone aware that we're still looking at any contact to the head virtually is going to lead to at least a penalty. Okay, what I will do is show an example of that penalty only situation here. And hopefully the lag time's not too bad on the replay. But what the replay should show when we get to it is that the tackler initially made contact on the shoulder, and then as he continued through with the tackle, and you'll see the writing here, the tackle ends up sliding up to the head and the neck and head area, right? Which is hence the tackle only. And there's that explanation again here below. And here's our definition of what would be deemed a reckless tackle. So a player is deemed to have made reckless contact during a tackle or attempted tackle or during other phases of the game if in making contact the player knew or should have known that there was risk of making contact with the head of an opponent but did so anyways. This is important when we get to some of the examples further on. This sanction applies even if the tackle starts below the line of the shoulders, right? So you can still, and this is where it goes back to the accidental may becoming a yellow or a red, you can still start at the shoulder, but depending on how reckless the tackle is, and it slides up towards the neck or head, could result in a yellow or red card. This type of contact also applies to grabbing and rolling, twisting around the neck or head area, even if the contact starts below the line of the shoulders. And again, we will take a look at a few examples. Here, where we can use the reckless definition to a tackle situation, our minimum sanction is a yellow card, and our maximum sanction is a red card. So let's take a look at a yellow card example. So what we'll see on the replay is the tackler's initial contact begins at the head or neck, not even at the shoulders. So the player should have known that there was the possibility of making contact with the head or neck, continued with the tackle anyways in that position, and then used a little bit of force to bring the player down. Okay? And so we'll see the term moderate force and recklessness. This is language used by World Rugby, and it's language we are going to try and continue to use as we go through a few more of the examples a little bit later on. All right. Sorry, my apologies. Just working through this. There we go. Here's a red card example. So the same criteria to start with in regards to the yellow card applies here, where the initial contact is straight to the head and neck area. However, there is a substantial force and recklessness that has been attributed to this particular tackle, which would elevate this particular tackle to a red card situation. All right, so again, the tackler should have known that there was the possibility of making contact, continued through, used excessive force and recklessness, and should have been shown a red. Okay, and there's that description again. Right. So a few more points to keep in mind in regards to the dangerous, accidental, and reckless tackles. All right. So the first is that we do not have television match officials in domestic community rugby. So it's important to note that referees, especially those with no assistant referees, right, will have one look at an incident and need to make a decision based on one look, depending on their angle, their position, the number of bodies in front of them, and a whole other slew of considerations that need to be taken into account. All right. This means that before anything else, every stakeholder in the game needs to be supportive of this initiative, okay, and understand the purpose behind it, and also to seek to have some empathy for the job the referee is trying to do. So what I'm not here saying is that referees aren't going to make mistakes, because they certainly are, and the application hopefully is where we will get consistency in terms of the processes they use and the criteria they use to determine the definitions between the two different types of reckless tackles when it comes to the excessive or moderate use of force and recklessness versus the accidental tackle or dangerous tackle. Okay. However, based on the look that they get, it might certainly play into what kinds of decisions they make, okay? And the second part to this is that it's important for players to understand that they are the ones who put themselves in positions, when they put themselves in positions to tackle at the shoulders or above, they put themselves at risk of being sanctioned, right? So it's it's relatable or comparable to the situation where tacklers who land on the wrong side of the ball, right, are immediately liable to be penalized for not rolling away because they put themselves in a position on the wrong side of the ball. As soon as a tackler or attempted tackler puts themselves in a position to tackle at the shoulder levels or possibly above, they immediately take on responsibility for being liable to be penalized. Just keep that in mind. So a couple of things to help guide referees. I think it's important that in ensuring that well in advance of kickoff, both teams, captains, and coaches are well aware of the new measures and law trials, right? So if that means getting to the field a little bit earlier and looking at having one-on-one discussions for a little bit longer, either with more players than just the captain, perhaps a forward leader and a backs leader, however we can make sure that we get the message across and that everyone's aware of what the expectations are, I think are very important. Right? I also think it's very important for referees to do the following and trust your gut feeling on the field. However, it needs to have been taken into consideration with the criteria that's been outlined before, right? And this comes into effect when we look at a tackle situation that is reckless, especially. So if a referee cannot talk yourself out of a red card, the red card must be given. So if we look at a tackle situation and we're questioning whether or not the recklessness and the ferocity of the tackle was one where we're questioning, do I have to hand out a red card? As soon as you start asking the question, can I do that, without saying it was moderate, then you must hand out the red card. It is important for us to understand why this is necessary, and is to ensure that we're not losing sight of the importance of the differentiation between reckless tackles that have moderate recklessness and force and something more than that. As soon as we question if there's something more, we cannot provide a reason for us not to hand out that red card. It's the same with questioning whether or not we suspect a concussion. As soon as we suspect, there is doubt in our mind, and we must go with the safest option. In this instance, the option here is only for a red card. I think it's important for coaches and players to understand that as well. Okay, and then obviously the same applies for looking for a difference between a yellow card and a penalty kick. So in a situation where we're unsure if it's deemed reckless or accidental, as soon as we have that doubt in our mind, we must go with the reckless decision and award the yellow card. Okay, I hope that's clear, but if anyone has a question, and I see Karen Lozada does, Karen, I will answer that actually as soon as I'm done this next slide. Okay, so there's a little bit of guidance for coaches. All right, so a couple of things, obviously, to be up to speed with the new measures and law trials and open dialogue with officials. I think it's important that prior to a game, coaches now, with so much emphasis on these new measures to limit contact to the head, be proactive as well as the referee. I'm not saying one is expected to start a conversation or not. What I'm saying is that both need to be on the same page when it comes to wanting to make sure we get players to lower the point of contact at the tackle area. Okay, I think it's also important for coaches to remind players of their responsibility for keeping the tackle safe. As much as ball carriers can sometimes impact the outcome, the important thing to note is that World Rugby and the laws hold the tackler accountable. So it's important for players to be aware of that. Okay. There's also a risk, an inherent risk in the double tackle, as it's being coached at some levels, not all levels, and certainly not lower levels potentially. But if we are coaching that, just be aware of the risk, and especially if that second defender is going for the ball around the chest. All right, so things to keep in mind. And then finally, there are some resources available to develop the proper tackle tracking and tackle technique, and I will show some of those in a moment. Okay, so I will answer Karen's question first here, and then I will get to some of those resources, and then I will take a look at answering a few more questions, because it looks like we have about 25 minutes here. So Karen's question, in lower levels of rugby, you see a lot of jersey swinging tackles. What is the expected call? Is it yellow card or red? So World Rugby hasn't come out with a definitive answer definitive measure in related to that specifically. So what my interpretation at the moment is to use what we currently have as our criteria for what is a reckless or dangerous tackle or accidental tackle. So the player in the swinging jersey swinging tackle has put themselves in a position where they know they are putting the ball carrier at risk of having contact made to the head, and they should not be doing that. So right away we're in the reckless area, right? The second piece to that is that there is often, and by definition, no wrap in the tackle. So immediately we're thinking that we need to sanction in some capacity. And then the last part would be whether or not contact actually did make, the ball carrier did actually have contact made on the head, whether it be by a player who is not part of this tackle situation or by the ground even, okay? Because the tackler is putting themselves in a position to be liable by their action for sanctioning, the outcome will have an impact. So as soon as that swinging tackle takes place, we have a situation that is reckless. So we're looking at a yellow card. And then once the tackle has been completed, if that ball carrier's head has made contact in any way that is dangerous with their head, we could be looking at a red card. So it's important for players to understand how serious the swing tackle is going to be taken this year. And I will have more on that coming out. I hope that answers your question. Karen, if you need any more clarity, just fire away again, and I will try and address it as we go through this. Okay, so I'm opening up a separate slide here, or screen, and I'm going to take a look at what are some of the resources that we have. So to start with, what we do have is the press release that Rugby Canada issued. Excuse me. And it has here several links at the bottom. So what I've done is I've opened these links on a separate page, but basically it shows us the memo that has been sent to all provincial unions, again, where all these links are listed, and all of the content is again described, and the actual laws are written in. Okay. The second link is of a Dropbox link where this PowerPoint with all of these videos are available. And remember, this content is all available in English and French. We have another link which has the slides in a PDF format with no embedded video, but they do have the links to where the video can be found. Okay. Finally, we have on Rugby Canada's Communications YouTube page a slew of videos that are not included, some of them are, but not all of them are included in the PowerPoint, just to limit the size of it because it's already quite large. But it will include all of them that are in there, as well as a few more in regards to some of the dangerous tackles which would lead to yellow cards or penalty kicks or red cards. Okay. Finally, it also includes a link to World Rugby's player welfare page, which I haven't pulled up. But I have pulled up Rugby Canada's PlaySmart page, where we can take a look at what are the minimum requirements from Rugby Canada in order to become a registered club coach or match official, as well as some key resources to use when as a coach, right, and focusing on player welfare. And then I've also separately pulled up here our national key themes, and I brought it down to the page where tackle technique and tracking is introduced. Paul Hunter is working diligently on creating video that will outline what these scenarios or skill practices will look like. However, we can see what is it that we're looking for in the tackler when it comes to completing a tackle, the process prior to, the tracking, etc., and then the ball carrier, right? All of which is emphasizing safety at the tackle area. Okay, so those are just a few of the resources available amongst, I'm sure, some of the several other pieces that everyone is already aware of at separate websites. Okay, just give me 1 second here to try and finalize this. So what I have done is taken clips from the Canadian Rugby Championship that occurred in 2016. And I wouldn't mind showing just a couple of incidences, and we can take a look at, again, what would that look like at the community level or at the more local level. And I am working on video at even lower levels, especially as the high school season starts up and club rugby age grade seasons start up. We can take a look at the application furthermore. So on the return phase, we'll see a penalty-only situation where the contact starts on the shoulder and slides up around the head or neck area. And we'll see it's correctly penalized by the referee. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll show a yellow card example. And the reason why I wanted to show these examples was because without the professional video available, what we don't see often is what the impact is in lower quality video in terms of the recklessness and the force that's being used. So I wanted to make sure we all are clear on what it can look like on tape from a domestic game. So we'll see here, although the attempted tackler is the one who probably ends up getting it worse for wear, the contact begins up high. So right away, the tackler has put themselves in a position where they know they could be making contact with the head and yet continued with the tackle anyways. As soon as that first point of contact is made around the head or neck area, they are now liable to be penalized with the, sanctioned with a yellow card or red card, and a yellow card would be appropriate in this situation. Again, it's just going back to that definition that we've seen previously. Right, and we'll take a look at another yellow card example from the same match. So we'll see here there's an increase in the amount of recklessness and force that's being used by the second defender. So again, the second defender, by going high and looking for the ball, has put themselves in a position where they should have been aware that they could make contact with the head and yet continued with the tackle regardless. The first point of contact is probably close to around the head or neck. And then the twisting motion adds to the recklessness factor. This would be a yellow card under the new measures to limit contact to the head. Okay. Thankfully, I didn't find in what I was able to see a red card example. Now, the last part I want to get to here is looking at a couple of clean-out examples. Remembering that the definition applied to rolling around the head or the neck area. So this particular incident would be a penalty only, and although it doesn't look malicious, the player's clean out So black. Unfortunately, I don't see a number, but the black clean out on white number 6 has one arm around the neck and uses force to bring that player to ground. That would be, doesn't use force around the head or the neck. So we decided that would be a penalty only situation, which went unnoticed by the referee at the time. And this would be a yellow card situation in a clean out. So we'll see the player come into the clean out, put themselves in a position where they should have known that they could have made contact with the head or neck and continued anyways. They also did not wrap. And again, put themselves in an awkward position to make a clean out and did so ineffectually, right? Which in this situation, because of where the initial point of contact was would lead to a yellow card. Okay, so those are the examples from the CRC I pulled up, and again, I will make them available to everyone along with the video of this session. So we have a few minutes left here, and what I did want to do was take a few more questions if people have any, and then we can close out the session. So I'll give it a couple of minutes to see if anyone has anything they want to type in. And Karen, if you can just confirm that I answered your question in regards to the jersey swinging tackles, you can type in yes to the questions box. That would be great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I just don't know how long it takes for some people to type questions out, so I'll give it just a couple more seconds. And in the meantime, I can certainly say thank you to everyone for having participated, and I look forward to answering any further questions via email. There will also be 3 further seminars being held in February. What I wanted to ensure was that BC coaches had an opportunity to take in some of this content prior to their games coming up this weekend and in the weeks to come. As for the rest of the country, obviously, as coaches prepare, I will hopefully have more content, and we'll be able to provide examples of where referees did things really well in the domestic area of the game and where we can work on in the future. So in the meantime, I see we don't have any further questions at the moment. So again, thank you to everyone. I will have this posted as quickly as I can, and I look forward to seeing you all in the upcoming season. Thank you very much.